Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Future State video where I say words and you, the beautiful people, listen. It is I, your crazy Nicolas Cage, your steward of Gondor, your genius, billionaire playboy, basic YouTuber philanthropist, SuperCliff. And would you kindly hit that like and subscribe button, for every little bit helps in this majestic YouTube world. And today, we are covering Future State, Aquaman, issue number 2, written once more by Brandon Thomas and drawn by Daniel Semper. And away we go, as our story begins with a flashback 6 years in the past, prior to where issue 1 last ended. And here we check in with Andy Curry, the daughter of Arthur Curry and Mera, whom last we saw got separated from Jackson Hyde due to a giant squid turtle attack, which resulted in Andy having to cut off her leg and Jackson getting imprisoned by the people of Neptune. Side note, I love saying squid turtle. I don't know why, I just thought I'd tell you guys because the more you know. Anyways, and so we see Andy Curry washed up on a majestic looking beach, and immediately Andy begins to freak out. And it isn't just purely due to the loss of her leg, but she's also freaking out because Andy, for the first time in 14 years, is alone. And she's scared because she's only a kid, she's missing a leg, bleeding out more or less. And on top of that, it's not like Andy's stranded in the Caribbean somewhere. She's all alone in the confluence. She's not even on Earth. So her freaking out in my book is entirely justified. Now, while this is all happening, a school of glimmerfish show up to see who this person is. And if I'm going to be completely honest, these fish are really naive. They almost remind me of those green aliens from Toy Story. Like the aliens in Toy Story, they were never jerks or anything, but they would always point out the obvious. For example, when these fish pull up, they ask the question, hey, poor girl, do you need this blood over here? They can't read the situation, nor can they read emotion. And in case you didn't know, Andy's pretty emotional right now. Yeah, so glimmerfish. Anyways, following this exchange, Andy, who has the ability to control marine life, is basically saying to herself, screw it, and forces one of the glimmerfish to get help. However, because Andy is not used to controlling this power she has, her powers instead take over one of the glimmerfish and have it formulate into a new water leg for Andy, essentially solving the whole bleeding out problem, which is quite dope. However, this immediately infuriates the school of glimmerfish, as they demand that she release their brother and depart the island. Andy apologizes but explains in a very polite manner that she needs 2 legs in order to find Jackson, and that once this is all said and done, she'll give them back their brother. Now, here we're given a montage of Andy performing various survival skills that Jackson has taught her in order to survive. This includes hunting, starting a campfire, and the ability to fight against intruders. And while this is happening, glimmerfish are talking mad smack about Andy, telling her that she's going to fail, while at the same time telling her to give back their brother. So basically, they're just making her life absolutely miserable. But throughout, Andy endures, using Jackson's teachings to good use, as well as hand-to-hand combat against turtle raiders, along with knowing when to retreat, which Andy does so following the destruction of her shelter. Andy eventually swims far enough to the point where she's able to escape the annoying school of glimmerfish. However, as Andy continues to swim, the days pass by constantly, to the point where she basically realizes that she's not making any progress. Then suddenly, one of the glimmerfish, that's basically her leg, begins to talk, saying that she's not traveling the confluence the correct way. And it's here where both the glimmerfish and Andy work together. And for the next 6 years, the glimmerfish teaches Andy that the confluence is a living nexus of worlds, a being of water. And because of that, the confluence conducts Andy's journey in a manner in which best suits Andy. Now, eventually, Andy, 6 years later, has found Jackson Hyde's location, and from here she uses her ability to launch an underwater assault on the Neptune prison. And picking up where issue 1 immediately left off, we see Jackson taking on a platoon of guards, only to be then joined by Andy, now Aquawoman. And here Andy releases all of her pent-up rage and anger against the guards, as she is clearly furious that Jackson has been locked up for 6 years. Not to mention that her getting to this point finally was more than likely a living hell. So we can totally sympathize the fact that she basically wants to murder all these guards times 3,000. However, just as Andy's about to crush the skull of one of the guards, Andy is calmed down by Jackson, as it reminds her of her final lesson, that being restraint. And from there, the two make their getaway, successfully escaping Neptune. Once our heroes reach the surface, Jackson manages to officially calm Andy down, and as a result, Andy frees her aquatic army. Andy then proceeds to cry, but Jackson immediately hugs her, providing comfort, as Jackson tells Andy that they're both safe and alive, and that together they will find their way back home, added with the fact that they will never lose each other again. And as a way to end this story on a happy note, Jackson mentions to Andy that since she traveled across dimensions, got lost in time, ended up losing a leg only to have it replaced with a glimmerfish, she can now finally join the Justice League. Future State Aquaman issue number 2 was good. Better than issue 1, however the book suffers from it being only 2 issues, and the fact that the first issue primarily focused more so on Jackson Hyde rather than Andy Curry. Therefore, with issue 2 being more of an Andy Curry-centric book, the story juggled around quite a bit. Since there's only an issue's worth of getting Andy's character from point A to point B, C, and D, it's very fast-paced. And so it really doesn't feel earned, and overall you feel whatever about it, like, oh cool, that was a story to happen, cool, moving on. However, I do want to say that though this book has flaws, there is a lot of good. Basically, there is a story here, but I think if given enough time to weave, and with more direction in its narrative, then this could have been pretty dope. I think rather than focusing on Jackson in the first issue, have both books be Andy focused based. Don't do the whole flashback nonsense, just have us, the reader, journey alongside Andy and her going through her trials and tribulations. But that's just my opinion. I do hope, however, that the Confluence concept and Andy Curry really get their due at Infinite Frontier. Honestly, I want more of this, just, tidy it up a bit. Also, the art is fantastic. May the sea gods bless Daniel Sampere for all eternity. Future State Aquaman issue number 2 gets a 7 out of 10. Giggity goo.